Dr. William Rosenberg, professor of political science at Drexel University, joins us each week. We talk about some of the political issues of the day. He's a little concerned about what he's been hearing from the Speaker of the House, Nancy Pelosi, specifically on impeachment and also some of the other things that she has expressed concern about, whether or not President Trump might even pay attention if somebody is actually saying that he's got to stop what he's doing. And specifically, there's a big article about this by Glenn Thrush in the New York Times. Anyway, Bill Rosenberg's tweeting at Dr. B. Rosenberg and joins us. Bill, welcome. Thanks for being here this morning.
Good morning.
So let's talk a little bit about this. The Speaker last week, by the way, accused the Attorney General of committing a crime. There has been some pushback on some of the specifics of what he said in testimony. Let's not litigate that, but let us talk about the question that Ms. Pelosi reportedly, now this is not something that she quoted in public, but told associates she does not automatically trust the president to respect the results of any election short of an overwhelming defeat. In other words, if the election in 2020 is not a clear-cut victory for his opposition, I mean, if it's his win, he doesn't care, but if it's his opposition, that he won't respect it. And, you know, it's interesting, Bill, I had actually once wondered, well, what if Donald Trump were to just defy everybody? You know, if he said, look, I'm not leaving, you can't make me. And then they have to figure out how to make him leave. That does present some kind of an interesting perspective here.
Exactly. Right now we're facing a road that leads us to a major possibility of conflict. You know, we have a constitutional government that sets up separation of powers and checks and balances, and it sets up a role for the legislature and the judicial branch and the executive branch to be co-equal forces to sort of guard the democracy that we all hold so dear. The question really happens is what would occur if the president decided not to follow what either the public said in terms of an election, or if Congress stands up and says, we need you to do certain things or we're going to impeach you. And even if we're impeaching you, will you sort of move away? I sort of have dubbed this the Venezuela scenario. You have Maduro, who doesn't want to leave, and as long as he has control over the military, as long as they stand behind him and they're loyal, he's not going anywhere. So we have to really think about how this would play out. Right now we have Congress issuing a number of subpoenas and calling people to testify, and the president in the past couple of weeks resisted any document. Not one document has gone, for example, to Elijah Cummings' office. The people that have been asked to testify in Congress in open hearings have been told they're not supposed to do that. And it really challenges this whole notion of what's going to happen if nothing sort of gives by the president. Nancy Pelosi made just one more point. Nancy Pelosi made a point that back at the Watergate period, one of the charges was basically not complying with providing information to Congress. So that is another potential impeachment charge.
But then there was eventually a court decision that forced the president. The Supreme Court said, you got to turn this over. And so it was 2 out of the 3. And so the president had to turn it over. And I guess the question then we'd have to see is if President Trump were to give in. I wonder about the other side of this bill, which is, for example, the executive doing something and the legislative branch refusing to act. And I mean specifically the question, for example, let's say, go back to when President Obama, so we can take President Trump out of this equation. President Obama said, I'm nominating Merrick Garland to the United States Supreme Court. The Senate did not act on it. They delayed. And there was nothing really to stop them. I suppose somebody could have said to the judiciary branch, to the Supreme Court, hey, look, they are not, they are abrogating their responsibility under the constitutional advice and consent role of the Senate to move forward on this. And I wonder if that was ever considered any kind of a constitutional issue.
Well, you make an interesting point. I guess what I would respond by saying is that, there was a famous work, Exit, Voice, and Loyalty, that came out a number of years ago, and Congress was acting. Mitch McConnell was making it clear that Congress was going to do nothing. And I assume that would be within their role of making a legislative decision not to act. In the president's case, he's supposed to be the chief executive. He's supposed to follow the laws of the country. He's supposed to work with the other branches of government. So while I agree with your point that you would expect Congress to act and fulfill their roles. Congress may simply be saying, well, our role here is we're telling you we're not going to act, and that's essentially what Mitch McConnell did.
We are not going to legislate, or we are not going to do whatever you want us to do. And I guess it gets back to what I was saying, is that we've got the three branches of government. They're co-equal, but if it's two against one, like if the court rules one thing, that's kind of, in some ways, they're the referee, even though they're co-equal. But if they make the decision, then and they side with one or the other, then you would think that would move forward. And then, if there's resistance, that's when you actually have a constitutional crisis, I would submit.
Exactly. And the other thing I would say is, a couple of years ago, I heard Justice Breyer give a speech in Chicago about a book that he had just released. And one of the points he made was, look, we're 9 old men and women, and we really only have the power to make decisions within sort of an area of constraint. We can't go out and enforce the law. We're really bound by having the executive branch go out and lock people up or escort children into schools or whatever. And as a result, the courts have to be careful that they don't get in front of public opinion too far. Otherwise, their power is really muted. And one of the issues that I think really is important to recognize is that in a representative democracy, free press is a very important issue. And the president has continually sort of acted to delegitimize the press using words like fake news to undercut the media, who seems somewhat focused on going after him to sort of expose what they feel is inappropriate behavior. But with the polarization that's really present in the country today, Quinnipiac just released a poll last week that showed that 49% of the Republicans in the United States feel that the news media is the enemy of the people. And 92% in another study of Republicans and Republican-leaning voters say that the news media knowingly reports information that is misleading, or and at least sometimes. So in other words, there's a weaponization that's been taking place, particularly on the Republican side, that's going after the media. And if they are the sort of fourth estate to try and protect the future of our constitutional democracy here, we're in a little bit of trouble.
They just got to report the news. That's what we got to do. I mean, that's kind of what we're really supposed to do. Hey, one quick question about Robert Mueller. There has been this tentative date floated, although they kind of backed off on it. There's been an invitation to the special counsel to testify. What if he decides, I don't want to get into this anymore? I've submitted my report. I have no desire whatsoever to go before the Congress and get into this. Or if he goes in and says, look, I'll let the report speak for itself. You guys can interpret it. That's why I sent it. I intended it for you, but take it from there. I mean, I think I'm wondering if people are expecting, again, like they were when the report was getting ready to be issued, whether they're expecting some kind of a bombshell if he goes before Congress.
Well, I think that is sort of an open question. I mean, we really don't understand at this point what Mueller's thoughts are. We were given the opportunity to hear James Comey go before Congress and testify about his firing and about the reasons that various issues had transpired, at least from his perspective. Comey is different than Mueller. Mueller may simply say, as you've stated, I've issued my report. It's clear. Read the 120 pages of allegations about Russian contacts and Russian influence, and then you need to make a decision. Whether or not he does that or not, I mean, we're really talking about the future reputations of both, not only Mueller, but also Barr in this situation. And time will tell what they both do. At this point, we're not really sure.
And are Americans really deeply tuned into that back and forth right now, do you think, or not?
I think that they realize that this process is going on with this report out there. I think that we have sort of, again, a polarized situation that for Republicans, they feel that the matter is settled. They believe the president, when he says that the news media is just trying to continue to have a second Mueller investigation through Congress. But at the same time, Congress is constitutionally bound to provide oversight, and they are able to do that through holding hearings, and ultimately, if they detect that something is really inappropriate, to start impeachment proceedings. You know, we have the possibility, although not very probable, that Congress may impeach William Barr for lying to Congress. It would be kind of a litmus test to sort of move against the president. It would be probably a foolish thing to do, though, because if Barr ends up winning, it'll be another sort of notch that the administration will say, see, they've gone after us again, and they still haven't prevailed. So I think Nancy Pelosi and Chuck Schumer are playing a very dangerous game with the White House, and they're going to have to figure out how they want to engage and what issues they want to raise, particularly as we get closer and closer to the 2020 election. Let's remember that just a couple of weeks, the first presidential debates are taking place in June.
I was going to say, we get to that, and then July 4th is here, and then summertime for most people, and then the August recess, it's going to be all 2020 presidential, and this sort of, like, you wonder if this issue just sort of falls back in even in the priority for news and so on. It's just, I'm not sure where it goes from here, so we'll have to see. Bill Rosenberg, Dr. Bill Rosenberg, thanks so much, Bill. Always good to have you on.
Have a great day. Bye-bye.
Dr. William Rosenberg, professor of political science at Drexel University, co-author of News Verdicts, The Debates and Presidential Campaigns. His perspective joining us here this morning on the news of the day and the politics of the week. He is tweeting at Dr. B. Rosenberg at Dr. B. Rosenberg, Rosenberg.